So what I'd like to do is take us through about a 5-minute presentation. You've seen parts of this before. We have talked about a Veterans Memorial Site and a botanical gardens before. That was part of the Ken Smith original master plan. And his master plan, though, did not include the ARDA site. All the people who were competing to prepare the master plan were instructed that the master plan would not include the ARDA site. That would come into the Great Park later. But botanical gardens were looked at great length. He has a beautiful design for that. That has been displaced by subsequent planning decisions at the Great Park there. And the memorial site has been largely displaced with the advent of the ARDA site. That is the land where the action will take place. Next slide, please. Here's the ARDA site, 125 acres at the northeastern edge, actually, of the Great Park. That is the site that is now zoned for a Veterans Memorial Park and Cemetery. Next slide, please. This is what that site looks like now. We've spoken before of the fact that we own that site, but there have been no improvements made to it, no cleanup, and it is truly an eyesore. I think it kind of falls on us as a city to clean up that site and do it fast and move forward with whatever plans we might have. As you see here at the end of the gravel road, that is the Great Park neighborhoods. This is what people in the Great Park neighborhoods, many of them, look at every day. And we need to change that. Next slide, please. I made reference to the zoning law. That's the initiative law that was the product of circulation of this land use initiative. It was adopted by the previous city council, I was happy to say, after some 19,000 signatures were gathered. It qualified for the ballot for November of 2020, but the council then sitting, three of those council members are on this council, voted for it to adopt it without having to take it to an election. And by California law, once it has been adopted by the governing body and not having to go to an election, it is adopted and it is the law as though it were passed by the voters. So that's the initiative law of the city. The key provision here even though it's a long document restating much of the zoning code, the real key provision here is section 6Q9, and I'm just going to read it because this is important. This is what is supposed to go on the ARDA site going forward. Development District 9, the ARDA site. This district is the location for a Veterans Memorial Park and Cemetery. Structures determined to be of historic value may remain. A perimeter system of trees, trails, and gardens for use and enjoyment by the general public shall integrate the district with Great Park and adjacent uses. In other words, it is the framework for the Veterans Memorial Park. Section 9, of course, is just a restatement of the law that the initiative provisions are binding upon all of us, city council, all city council members, all city officials. Next slide, please. A number of us have kind of soldiered on here and have taken the approved concept plan approved by CalVet and have tried to translate that into what our Veterans Memorial Park and cemetery would look like. This is the Veterans Memorial Park without the cemetery. And I just want to go over those elements just a little bit. Roughly 25 acres, consistent with the concept plan adopted by CalVet. 25 acres would be a perimeter park. That's the lime green around the perimeter of both sections of the ARDA site. Adjacent to that and within it would be the mentioned botanical gardens, memorial gardens that were prescribed in the zoning ordinance.
No.
Also included is the world's largest flag, the idea being that the remaining runway historic features that are preserved, including the runway, the historic El Toro Control Tower, the tarmac, the hangars, would be repurposed for an aviation museum. The world's largest U.S. flag would be a mural flag painted on the runway. In this particular vision for the Veterans Memorial Park, there would be a reflecting pond. As I mentioned, there would be preservation of historic features. There would also be a walk of honor. You can see the trees right next to the flag there, adjacent to the perimeter park that is in turn adjacent to residential development. There's a tree lined on both sides, a tree lined walkway that is envisioned as a walk of honor to honor those veterans and their families, frankly, that have served and sacrificed over the years. It would be a part of our Veterans Memorial Park. There's also here a forest reserve, which is the area to the right. 35 acres, it could be much more. It could be also the area below the American flag there and around the edges where a veteran cemetery would be. But if indeed the choice is to go with Gypsum Canyon or whatever, then it seems to me the rest of the ARDA site should contain forestation, larger botanical gardens, gardens of all kinds, and so forth. So having gone through that, can we take a look at the next slide? This is an artist's rendering with the help of civil engineers and designers and others of the perimeter park that would be a wonderful buffer between the Veterans Memorial Park itself and the nearby residential dwellers. Next slide, please.
Councilmember Agran, just reminding you at 10 minutes now.
All right, I'll just take a few more minutes to finish up, Mayor. The perimeter park can include all kinds of memorial installations, information, and would be 2.5 miles around the Great Park, around the Great Park Veterans Memorial Park. Next slide, please. Here is the entire thing animated, I guess complete with birds. Next slide, please. I think we already did this one. If you'll recall, the zoning ordinance, the initiative called for gardens, memorial gardens of all kinds. And that, of course, includes botanical gardens. You've seen the very small but iconic botanical garden, the Botanical Building in San Diego. Next slide, please. This is the nearby Laguna Niguel Botanical Gardens, about 18 acres or so. Next slide, please. More memorial gardens. And of course, on the right, we have our very own Northwood Community Park, memorial to veterans who served, sacrificed, indeed lost their lives in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. Next slide, please. The zoning law spoke to preservation of historic buildings, historic structures. The iconic aircraft control tower is certainly worth preserving and repurposing as part of an aviation museum. Next slide, please. Also including hangars that are nearby, runway and tarmac, that all could be part of a wonderful aviation museum. And now that we're getting so many planes as part of the Flying Leatherneck, 40 planes or so from Miramar up at the Great Park, this would be a wonderful place to display them. Next, please. This is the caretaker's house at the Arboretum, wonderful Arboretum, which we could have as part of our forestation project as well. This is in Fullerton on the Cal State University campus. We can have our very own Arboretum. Next, please. And this is more forestation. You've seen these before. On the left is Carbon Canyon, an intentional forest planted only 45 years ago. And on the right is another kind of view of forestation and the peaceful nature that this Veterans Memorial Park and Cemetery could convey. And finally, next. This is the existing view on Benchmark at Cadence. This is how it looks now. Next slide. With the perimeter park and the rest of the Veterans Memorial Park going in, this is how it could look, in my mind, how it would look. Next slide. Same thing with Cadence near Poussin Way now, and how it will look with the construction of the perimeter park and adjacent features. Next slide. Mayor, I spoke to you, had a chance to speak to you about a proposed motion that I would like to introduce at the appropriate time. I don't need to go over it now, but I'm happy to when you think it's appropriate.
Let's turn it over to our colleagues and see if they have any questions or comments. And I'm going to start off with Councilmember Kim.
Yeah, let me just say something else, just out of courtesy to my colleagues here. Carl, do you have hard copies of the motion? It's a fairly simple motion, which I'll be happy to explain at the appropriate time, but I want my colleagues to have a chance to look at it while we're taking other testimony. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for according the time, and I do hope we can move forward with this tonight. Thank you.
Turning it over to Councilmember Kim.